Hey everyone! Today we're discussing dog breeding, but first off, story time. When I was in high school, it was necessary to have volunteer hours, and being the dog lover I am, I decided to volunteer at the local animal shelter where I met a 4-year-old pit bull named Daisy. I came to learn that 2 years prior to that, Daisy had been rescued from a backyard breeder who abused her greatly. And even though it had been some years, her teeth still hung low because her body did not have the adequate time to recover in between pregnancies. According to the Puppy Mill Project, an educational organization who advocates for fighting puppy mills, last accessed February 24th, 2022, there are around 167,388 breeding dogs in the country. That is nearly 3,350 breeding dogs per state. Someone you know or live near could be breeding dogs. Today, we'll be discussing why it's necessary for Congress to ban commercially bred dogs in the rest of the country. We'll be looking at the problem, some effects, and a solution. Starting off, we have a serious problem. Dogs are being bred in excess. The Humane Society of the United States, last accessed February 28, 2022, states that there are over 2 million puppies being sold per year. Now, breeding would have a strong contribution to that, as well as many dogs that are on the streets and who are not spayed or neutered. PETA, People for Ethical Treatment of Animals, further adds that some breeders do not spay or neuter the puppies before selling them, which means that later on, those puppies could have their own puppies, further adding to those large numbers. And then surprisingly, a big client of breeders is pet stores. Breeding Business, a company for ethical breeding of dogs, wrote an article on May 17, 2019, discussing why people would rather buy from pet stores over breeders. Some of these reasons include that pet stores are easier to come by. Pet stores tend to be lower price than straight from a breeder, and the dog visitations can be scheduled around the buyer's time. Just as a grocery store would stock up on the merchandise they notice selling faster than everything else, pet stores also stock up on the puppies and kittens because they know that those are the most popular animals. Now that we've looked at the problem, let's talk about some effects. We'll be discussing 2 effects: the abuse of animal parents and birth defects. Now, dog breeding is a business, and puppies are what make the money. So where does that leave the parents? Yes, there are many sites and sources of how to properly care for the dogs. One, which is the American Kennel Club, an expert in breeding and health of dogs. Last accessed March 1st, 2022, they compiled a wonderful list of how to care for the dogs. This includes preparing the mothers for pregnancies, knowing the genetics of both parent animals, as well as registering the litter for history of origin when they're being sold. But what about those that care about the money over the dog's health? These would be our backyard breeders. RSPCA Australia, a branch of the Royal Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, last accessed March 1st, 2022, defines the backyard breeders as those who inadequately care for the animals. This would include supplying limited food or water, allowing limited range of movement, as well as little to no shelter. Now, the other effect is birth defects. In order to have a purebred, some form of inbreeding is going to be necessary. In a September 16, 2010 article, PBS compared inbreeding of dogs to the inbreeding of humans. Now, if people were to inbreed, such as siblings or just close blood relations, that child is far more likely to develop defects, whether that be mentally or physically. A well-known dog with physical defects is the French Bulldog and other flat-faced dogs. Described by Davies, a veterinary referral hospital in Europe, last accessed March 1st, 2022, French Bulldogs have BOAS, or brachycephalic obstructive airway syndrome, which Davies then describes as the skull being smaller than the amount of tissue in their head. Such as when I squeeze this ball, it wants to escape my hand. The tissue does within the dog's heads as well, pressing on their nasal passage and causing a limited intake of air. Now that we've looked at the defects, let's talk about a solution. There is a clear solution here. We can urge Congress to ban commercially bred dogs in the rest of the country. Reported by Patricia West on Today's Veterinary Nurse, last access March 1st, 2022, the governor of California, Jerry Brown, signed Bill AB 485 into law. This law became effective January 1st, 2019, and banned commercially bred dogs, cats, and rabbits in the state of California. This means that pet stores must provide animals that came either from shelters or rescues. Yes, this law was faced with opposition, mainly from the breeders. One such is the American Kennel Club, which argues that Californians will now have a more difficult time obtaining the characteristics and traits they want in a dog. Now, I don't see this as a problem. Although I do not see breeding as ethically or morally wrong, adoption of a mixed breed is just as good of a way of obtaining a new family member. And now California is just the start, but we can do something to further this progress. The National Humane Genome Research Institute, last accessed March 1st, 2022, states that we can contact our local state representative to sponsor our ideas to the whole of Congress. Today, we discuss why it's necessary for Congress to ban commercially bred dogs in the rest of the country. We looked at the problem, some effects, and a solution. Remember, there are 167,388 breeding dogs in the country, which is nearly 3,350 breeding dogs per state. Someone you know or even live near could be breeding dogs. As of this year, Daisy has been in a loving home for, wow, like 6 or 7 years. But that doesn't take away the horrors that she had to go through to get there. And there are hundreds of thousands of other dogs that could be experiencing the same trauma Daisy was able to get out of. There's something that we can do in order to change that. Let's work towards a goal which stops dogs from having to face the horrors that Daisy was able to get away from. Thank you.